Welcome to the Dance Lens podcast, where we take a deep dive on all things dance. We'll look at how the art form is woven into politics, history, and cultural developments, and we'll draw back the curtain on the lives of the artists in conversations with dancers, choreographers, directors, set and costume designers, and more. If you're in the industry or a curious listener, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Cynthia Dragoni. Thanks for listening and enjoy. We're here with Pau Pujol, and he's a soloist with Philadelphia Ballet, formerly Pennsylvania Ballet, and working under the artistic director Angel Carella. And you have an amazing background. I was reading about you. You started studying in Spain, and then you also studied at English National Ballet, Royal Ballet, American Ballet Theater, right?
Just some summer intensives there. But yeah, like my whole training was in Spain. And then I did move around a lot for summer intensives and short like scholarship things. But my whole training was in Spain.
Okay. And I saw that you won bronze at the Youth America Grand Prix at the finals in
Yeah.
New York City. That's a big deal for the senior division. For anybody who doesn't know, it's one of the biggest ballet competitions in the world. It's international, and the most prestigious part of it is the finals that happens in New York City. So to place in that, it's like winning the Olympics.
It is big. It is big. I think it's the biggest competition, like by numbers
Yeah.
of contestants. Yeah, it was really intense, but it was good.
Is that how you got the job at Pennsylvania Ballet?
No, actually, I trained. Corella is the director of the company, and I trained because he tried having a company there in Spain when he retired from ABT, and it was going well. But then when the crisis hit back in 2008, things started going downhill. So in the end, he had to leave. The company had to close, but the school kept going, and this is where I trained. And so he knew me from when I was 13 years old. That's when I started there in the school.
Wow.
So yeah, when I graduated, he offered me the contract, and I accepted super happily. So yeah, I mean, it did really help me getting other scholarships and other offers too. So I'm really glad for that. And also, I think actually having won the medal did help me with the visa stuff. That we know it's really complicated. So
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't even think about that. That makes sense.
yeah, so it was definitely a big point towards getting that visa.
Wow. And so, why did you pick Philadelphia Ballet over whatever other offers that you had?
Mainly because I knew Angel knew me already. So it wasn't like obviously I had to prove myself. Just being in the school doesn't mean you're necessarily gonna work in a different environment. But knowing that Angel already knows how I work, has seen me progress, and he has faith that I'm gonna be able to accommodate myself in the company was just very reassuring for me because I wasn't going blind. Otherwise, if I would have gone anywhere else, it's just like you're there, everything's new, you don't know anything, you don't know anyone. So it was really helpful for me to be in a place where I knew I was supported. And also the fact I really like Philadelphia as a company because it has the best things from a big company and the best things that you can get from a smaller company.
Interesting.
It joins like real like world class repertoire and technique. Like we have really good dancers and we have all these big ballets, these new productions, while also we're not, 300 dancers like in the Paris Opera.
Right.
So you're definitely gonna dance much more. They're gonna see you, and your career is gonna evolve much faster than it would if there were 300 dancers. So
Right.
yeah.
And what's the rep like now? Because it was founded by Balanchine people, but then when Angel took over, I feel like it's essentially a totally different company than it
Yeah.
used to be.
So actually, we're Starting, if I'm not mistaken, the 60th anniversary of
Hmm.
the foundation of our company. We're gonna be celebrating for 2 years, this and the next season. And it was founded by Barbara Weisberger.
Yeah.
She was a disciple of Balanchine himself. And as you said, it was mostly Balanchine.
Yeah.
When Angel took over, he started doing more classical ballets while
Hmm.
keeping the Balanchine core. And I think right now he's done a really good job at managing both, doing ballets, classical ballets like, Swan Lake, uh,
Yeah.
Sleeping Beauty, while doing all the Balanchine repertoire that that's the essence of Philadelphia Ballet. And I think it's really not just, it has brought a lot of interest in the company because it was like really fresh.
Hmm.
We've been doing Balanchine repertoire for a long time. Maybe audiences were glad to see something different. And
Sure.
also for the dancers, I think it's really not that common to have this different repertoire, especially in other companies outside of the States. You don't see Balanchine much more. So to be able to do Balanchine and to do classical ballet is really a gem.
Right. Especially for a dancer. You get to have those crossovers. Do you guys have guest choreographers come in, or it's like mostly those two genres?
So every year, usually we have a program that's a triple bill of new productions
Hmm.
and a mixed bill. This year we're doing In the Upper Room by Twyla Tharp,
Hmm.
In the Middle, Somewhat Elevated by Forsyth,
Yeah.
and then The River by Albin Ailey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That's so cool. That sounds
yeah.
like so much fun.
So I think that's one of the strongest suits of this company is the repertoire. We always do so much, and this legendary repertoire that usually in a triple bill, one of them is like the strong play,
Yeah.
and then the others are, well, good also, but not,
Right.
but like these are really big names, not just the choreographers, but the pieces itself. Yeah, I just love the repertoire here.
That's awesome. And you were telling me before we started recording that you're doing a new production of Carmen.
Yeah, we're starting the season now with a new production of Carmen. Everything's new. Well, music obviously it's Bizet's, but yeah, Angel is making his own Carmen, and we're all really excited to see how it's gonna be.
That's so exciting. So when are you performing that?
I think we're starting first weekend of October.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say maybe I'll come and see you, but I don't think I'll be in the US. But if I am, I'm coming to Philadelphia to see you in Carmen.
Okay, just tell me, I can get you a ticket.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I actually grew up in Philly.
Really?
Hmm. Yeah. So the people who founded Pennsylvania Ballet, like Barbara Weisberger founded it, but then one of the main principals that came from School of American Ballet that Balanchine sent with Barbara Weisberger to be the principal at this new company was my teacher, Barbara Sandinato. So that history is all intertwined.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I went to the rock school when it was still Pennsylvania Ballet's school.
Yeah.
We performed at the Academy of Music and everything. So we've been on the same stage.
It's crazy how connected the ballet world is.
I know. I always tell my students, I'm like, be nice because there's only 25 people in the dance world. You're gonna see them again.
Literally, always be nice to everyone because next time they're gonna be your stager.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Decades could go by without seeing them, but it's like that circle, it always loops back
Yeah.
around, especially now with the internet. So I'm curious about your experience with Spain versus the US. Like, I guess my first question would be, how is ballet seen in Spain? Are people interested in it? Is it respected? And do you feel that there's a difference between how it's seen here, just from your perspective as a dancer?
I still feel in Spain people don't really know about ballet.
Hmm.
Most people have never seen any ballet, or it just not, since there's only one company, one
Hmm.
professional company. I mean, one established professional company. There's others that have been appearing in recent years, but there's only the national company that's been stable throughout the years, and people don't really get to see ballet.
Mm.
Don't really know that you can actually make a living out of it. And if you tell them, oh, well, I'm actually a professional ballet dancer, it's just not something that they think you can do. Like, oh, you can live out of this? Or like, is that your
Right.
hobby? It,
Right.
it's not a recognized thing. And like, there's still a lot of prejudice, I think.
Hmm.
It's getting better, but there's a lot of stigma still around ballet just being pink tutus.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what your perspective is on it, especially being in, a great company like the one that you're in. But I find that's still really true here. Like the people who know about it, But like if you're not exactly on that circuit or you haven't taken, a purposeful interest in it, that they still think, well, first of all, they don't understand really even what it is, right? It's like the level of artistry and athleticism, it's just completely unknown, what it actually is. And it's this idea that, like, your 4-year-old does in a pink tutu on a Tuesday for 45 minutes, and that's it. And they'll grow up to have great posture. And it's really nobody's fault. It's like it's just not part of the conversation. It's not something that we get educated over.
Yeah.
I know a lot of very educated people who know a lot about the opera, and those same people will very often know almost nothing about ballet. And it's not because they're not interested or not because they're not smart, it's just not part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think ballet is such a niche thing that it's either people that have a lot of interest or the common audience doesn't know about it. And I feel like that's similar the situation here in Spain, but I feel like
Hmm.
in the States it's actually a little bit better because just by the sheer amount of professionals and
Hmm.
professional companies, they interact more with people.
Hmm.
Just by
Right.
existing, they make themselves important. And like, oh, you see ads for the Nutcracker, which doesn't exist in Spain.
Right.
There's a more tradition of, going to the ballet or just by seeing it, walking down the street and seeing a banner of the ballet, uh,
Right.
it makes it exist, as you're saying, that people don't even know. Like, it's not a part of our conversation of daily
Yeah.
life of people. But just by being there, even if it's a banner, you get more used to it. And, I don't think a lot about, I don't know. I've seen the Philadelphia Orchestra a couple of times, but I don't think about it regularly.
Right.
I know it's there. I know people can make a living out of it. And I think in the States, slowly but surely, people are realizing more that the ballet is just another profession. And I feel that especially maybe not so much in Italy, but I feel like Greece, Spain, and Portugal are still lagging behind. And it feels like it's a foreign kind of thing. Like, oh,
Hmm.
ballet is this kind of like, you know, Russians do it.
Right.
And I think
Right.
he also had a lot of influence in the States in that kind of sense of reclaiming ballet as something that could be as American, as the flag.
Right.
And it made it more popular. So I think there's also a lot of initiatives that companies are doing now to make it not more popular, but also more accessible,
Yeah.
to make it less niche, less elitist, even less classist, because like even now, a lot of people cannot pay for tuitions because they're so expensive, or apprenticeships are actually not living wage. So you need to come from a rich background, otherwise you cannot afford to be a ballet dancer. So I think there's been a lot of actually like companies have realized what the problem is, and they're trying to make ballet more accessible so that everybody knows that this is a thing and that anyone can watch and be a part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, like when you mentioned the orchestra a minute ago, it's like it was always just so curious to me, like why would the orchestra, can you hear the sirens? I'm like, wow, we're
Yeah.
filming New York, kids. It's just interesting that the orchestra was, I mean, maybe because it existed for longer. Music is obviously older than ballet, but they were, even the classical orchestras were way ahead of ballet in how much people got paid and their budget. Like it was just a bigger machine. And I always thought that was so interesting. Did you know that Philadelphia Orchestra, I don't know if it still is, but for a long time it was one of, if not the best orchestra in the world. They have this like really rich classical music scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I feel like the whole city is very music oriented.
Yeah,
We have the Curtis Institute, we have the Philadelphia Orchestra.
right,
So there's a lot of institutions that are really important. And I think that's why ballet has also lagged behind music, just because it's kind of an extension of it, but it's different.
right.
Obviously, it appeals to a smaller part of the audience of music. But also, one different thing that I feel between Spain and here is that actually, like, you can train, you can get an education in ballet or in dance in colleges and universities here, while
Mhm.
that's impossible in Spain.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, you can get higher education level in like a diploma in dance, but it's very specific conservatories, public conservatories that offer that. So it's still not integrated in the education system. It feels like
Right.
it's its own thing apart from it. You don't even, it's at college level, but it's not a college diploma. So it still feels like, oh, well, you know, different thing. You're not educated. You didn't do college. You did your own vocational school.
Yeah, here it's not integrated. I mean, unless you can go, there are arts schools that exist, but up until all through high school, up until you're 18, generally it's a totally separate thing, which is why most dancers on high level companies, you might find one who has a dance degree and there's like an article about them in Dance Magazine and the newspaper because it's so amazing. But in general, you know, and then because the colleges, university here is big business, I think that's a main reason why they started having dance degrees. It's just like, it's a marketing, it makes the whole thing a little bit more appealing to a certain audience.
Yeah,
But what are they doing with those degrees? It's still not really integrated the way it needs to be in order for a dancer to really be successful. I know that there are some dancers who go to college and then they dance, and it's cool. I mean, basically, there's just not enough funding
yeah,
and
same.
there aren't enough jobs. And then if the people don't know what it is, why would there be more funding? Why would they buy tickets to a thing that they don't know what it is? So it's like this.
Yeah, I feel like, especially compared to other parts of Europe, not so much Spain, where there's a lot more state and like public budgets, it's way easier for them to just take risks.
Yeah.
Here in the States, obviously, you need to always be careful of what you do and like stay in budget. But yeah, I think that's compared to Spain, I feel since the space there is so barren because there's only one public company, the rest is pretty much the same as in the States, but with even less education about ballet. So people don't really know. You basically need to emigrate if you want to be a ballet dancer. There's some companies that are trying to make a change and
Mhm.
actually make it easy for people to stay, but it's hard. And if you really want to access and like compete on an international level, You either have the national company, which is just one company for the whole country, or
Right.
you need to emigrate.
Right. It'd be like if we just had ABT and that was it.
And the thing is, there's talent. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of people that want to dance, but there's just not the infrastructure to absorb all that talent or promote it.
Hmm.
A lot of people are forced to study abroad
Hmm.
and to work abroad too. And then,
There must be decent schools then.
yeah, as I said, there's a lot of talent. So a lot
Yeah.
of people go out and then come back, open their own schools, or start teaching in the public academies. And then, yeah, they try to make it better. But as long as the professional companies don't start appearing, there's no way that they can absorb all of the
Right.
students. So they're forced to emigrate. And there's a lot of good schools, good teachers, but it's just that there is no professional infrastructure.
Right. Wow. I'm glad you found a spot. You're an amazing dancer. I can't wait to add some clips
Thank you.
on here. Yeah, I found you. I mean, I think it was you were one of the first people that I found on TikTok, and I was like, who is this guy? He's so talented. So, speaking of your talent, what are, well, let me start at the end. Overall, like, what are your dreams for yourself as a dancer? Like, are there roles that you haven't performed yet? Are you interested in choreography? Like, what, and not talking about after dancing, that's a different question, but just, if there weren't any kind of limits, how would you fill up the space for yourself as an artist?
I feel like I'm still pretty early in my career.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like there's a lot of ballets that I still want to be in, of not just ballets, but experiences that I want to have.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy learning ballet, that's already said, and I also love being choreographed something new, being a
Mm-hmm.
part of something that's being created at, at that point and moment is
Mm-hmm.
such a great thing. So yeah, I have like I would love to do Romeo and Juliet. I would love to do Giselle at some point. I would love to do all the ballets, basically Bayadere, and also all these what's it called, theme and variations.
Oh, sure.
I love theme and variation, Jewels, Petit Mort.
Sure.
There's just so many great pieces that I want to do, which I'm hoping that I get to do them. And also just on another side, not just as a dancer, but I would also like to choreograph something.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it's something that we all need to try as dancers. And yeah, just just enjoy as much as I can whatever I do at that point.
Do you have favorite roles that you've already done?
Yeah, I really like doing I mean, this is pretty standard,
It's
but
okay.
I love Sleeping Beauty, Prince
Sure.
Desiree, and Prince Siegfried, which are from Swan Lake, the two most recognizable pieces that I've been in. But I actually also really like doing the villain.
I believe you.
Fun thing because usually like the stakes are lower,
Sure.
you don't have this big variation, or you don't have to do uh, 16 Alasakons. So it's
Right.
way relaxed in that kind of sense, and you can
Right.
really play with it. I don't know.
Yeah, you complete right. You play more. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I love the acting. So I think it's really great when you're the villain because you can just like go all for it. It's such a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like the Prince roles are, from an acting standpoint, are not that dynamic. It's
Yeah,
kind of like you could take one and put it in the other ballet. You just change the tights, maybe.
yeah. I feel like especially for Sleeping Beauty is not such well round. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like for Swan Lake, Prince Siegfried is a bit more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Character also depends on each production, but I feel like with the classics, depending on what version you're doing or who's teaching you, you can really try to find something more. you know?
Mhm.
Even if when you see it on paper, it's like, oh, he's just a standard prince from a classic movie,
Right.
yeah, like whatever. But actually, I think when you, as a dancer, try to make something more out of it, even if it's just like by bringing your personal take or watching different people, what they teach you, and making something new, like, we don't talk, we don't do, we have to convey all of that through the steps
Right.
of the acting. But I do think that people realize in the audience when they see it, they know that there's something more, and
I
that
agree.
you really, there's, it's more of a living person instead of just,
Mhm.
you know blueprints.
Right.
So yeah, I really enjoy that too, but I feel like just the feeling is,
You know what distinction I think is really interesting is for Giselle, sometimes they'll play Albrecht or Lloyd as someone who really was in love with her. And then sometimes they play him as, just kind of a player who then felt bad about it.
yeah,
I always think that's really interesting.
I mean, I prefer the really in love version of it. Otherwise, I feel like, why would he deserve to live on?
I know, especially after
Waiting for death penalty, but I'm like, why? um, you have to really repent
I know.
if
I,
you're gonna apologize, or otherwise, it's not. How is it justified to kill somebody if you were just playing with her? So I think
right, especially because Hilarion dies.
exactly.
The one who was genuine. It's like there is no justice.
Yeah, exactly. And I love Giselle. And like, I could talk about Giselle so much.
Me too. Me too.
We're doing it this season, and I'm so excited for it.
Oh, you are? That's exciting. When? In the spring?
Yeah, we did it the first season that I was in the company, and I remember just like watching all the ladies do it, and the music. And I don't know, I feel like Giselle is such a standard, a bright star in the night sky of ballet.
Yeah, in the crown.
Yeah,
It's like a jewel in the crown.
yeah. Like, everybody thinks about Swan Lake and Nutcracker, and yeah, they're also great. But I feel like Giselle is just, there's so much in the story, and not just like, obviously, choreography wise and stuff. It's really good too, but the story is just so human
Hmm.
that you can really feel it, and I think audiences realize that.
I agree with you. It's really like a pearl in the repertoire. It's its own thing. And even it's a little shorter than the other ballets. It's like this, I never leave Giselle. Sometimes you leave a performance and you feel like you just did an exercise.
Yeah,
But leaving Giselle, like I could have watched another act. Like there's something so precious and perfect.
yeah. And my mom used to hate it. I mean, she still hates it. She doesn't like ballet, and she would hate Giselle because she was like, this stupid girl. She just slaps because it breaks her heart, and like, it just didn't make sense to her. But I feel like, once you get into the story, and especially second act is just brings everything together, and I don't know. I think it's just such a great story that I just love it.
I agree with you. It's my favorite ballet. I totally agree with you. If I had to pick one, it would be Giselle for all those same reasons. And yeah, the second act is like, please don't anybody touch it. Like, just leave it alone. Reimagine some other ballet.
Yeah,
Do you have your roles yet for the season, or when does casting go up?
casting goes up later.
Okay. Well, I'll be excited to see that. I hope you'll share everything
Yeah,
with all of us.
I'll tell you. I'll tell you.
Okay, good. Oh, I guess we'll come back to that. Are there choreographers that you would like to work with that you haven't had a chance to yet?
So
They could be living or dead.
yeah, as I was telling you, uh, we here in Philly, they invite a lot of choreographers to set stuff on us.
Hmm.
Usually it's three pieces, but normally we can only be in one because we're all working at the same time. So the
Hmm.
worst part is that you see all these different pieces being made, and you're like, "Oh, I want to be in." And I've been so honored to be able to work with Juliana Nunez,
Hmm.
and I think that was last year. In the other room, it was Antonis Foniadakis. He's a Greek choreographer,
Hmm.
and his stuff is just mind blowing. And like my colleague is in there, they were working so hard. You would see like drenched in sweat, dying, and I was like, but it looks so good. And yeah, so I would really love to see like just work with him. His movement is so different from other things I've seen.
Hmm.
And yeah, other choreographers. There's a choreographer that I've only seen his stuff on Instagram, but it looks amazing. His name is Jay Manju.
Yes, yes, I know. I love his stuff. I know who you're talking about. I follow him.
It popped
Yeah.
up on my search page, and like it was crazy. All the like patterns and the way he played with ensemble and also soloists.
And the light,
Yeah,
there's so much poetry in it. It's so romantic.
minimalist, but very. I don't know. It felt really like everything was really thought about, and I
Hmm.
liked it. And then, hang on, because I wrote this down. Oh yeah, I also would love to work with Christopher Wildon.
Oh, yeah.
Like he's the god of choreography. He's the king of choreography right now.
Of
So I feel like, well, him and Radmansky. But
course, you have to say that.
yeah, but I would love to like just be in the same room with him. It
Sure.
makes me like wow, because all the ballets they both have made are so good, and yeah, I would just be so honored and humbled to be in their presence.
I think it's going to happen.
We'll see. I'm hoping.
You said a few minutes ago how you would like to try, choreographing some pieces, and you were saying that, it's something that all dancers should do. And I think it's so interesting that it's not something that all dancers do. Like, why don't we have that built into our development? Like that should just be a part of school. Like, it's so obvious.
I feel like because a lot of dancing right now is just executing,
Hmm.
so they kind of train you to be a machine.
Yeah.
You don't think more than you need to perform a step this exact same way that they want you to do it.
Hmm.
You miss a lot of the actual artistry behind it, you know? And I have friends that are more into contemporary dance, that they have their own companies.
Hmm.
And the way they think about dance is so different to the way ballet trained dancers think about it, just on a physical level, but also like the they do so much work because they need to choreograph, they need to create the piece, they need to think all of it. They're probably in charge of production and in charge of like contacting these other people too. And it's I don't know, I feel like they're more and more in contact with their artistic side because I'm not saying that executing or doing ballet is less artistic, but I feel like there's more to it than just executing a step
I
or
mean, I agree with you, and I totally hear what you're saying, and you're right. Because the contemporary dancers, it's just the nature of their business. Like, they, we have a system that we can belong to, right? So
yeah,
it's like, try to be your most perfect self so that you'll fit into the system and somebody else will choose you. Like you'll go to an audition and maybe you'll get chosen. And the contemporary dancers, they have almost no professional world to work with, relatively speaking, right? It's like there are 100 ballet companies to one contemporary company. If that, it's probably the wrong ratio. It's probably more like 500 ballet companies to like two contemporary companies. So they really function more like band members.
yeah,
Like if you have a band, you're like, well, where are we going to play? How are we going to get paid? Who's bringing the instruments?
exactly.
When are we going to rehearse? So it's like they're different. It's like a more entrepreneurial part of the brain.
Yeah, and also more expressive. I feel like contemporary artists are more like well, I want to express this, so I create this whole piece about it, while the hegemony of the classics in ballet just makes it that you're always going to do this repertoire. It's not necessarily negative because we all love the classics. We were just here fanboying and girling about that. But I think there's definitely space to create more things. And I think that it should be encouraged in schools.
I agree with you. I think it should be mandatory in schools, like beyond encouraged. Like this is just a part of your training because it's a different part of the brain. I mean, and really we're saying the same thing. It's like, if a Shakespeare actor is going to play a role, that doesn't make them not creative just because the role existed already. There's a lot of parallels there, but
Yeah.
it really is a different part of the brain to write your own story. And we should practice flicking that switch.
A very useful tool. If you become a stager or become a director at some point and you want to, you're going to have to choreograph something at some point, probably. Feel like a lot of people are just scared to do it, and schools don't make it easier.
For sure. Well, the schools are like, I feel like a lot in the profession now is really just based on the past. It's like, the schools are still coming out of that history of being the descendants of orphanages and military schools.
Yeah, I saw that video on TikTok.
Yeah. But so it's like we're still living in that reality. And I mean, in my heart, I'm very old school, right? It's like, I think you need to come in and be on time and stand up and bow to your teacher. It's not about throw it all out the window, but like just that these most obvious ways that we could move forward that we're not doing, I feel extremely confused
Yeah,
by it.
just when you look at like the ballet rules, the Aguila,
Mhm.
all the like the time where Petipa created all the classics, he was making so many that right now we don't actually perform anymore.
Right.
He was given the possibility to do all that, and I feel like we've venerated the classics so much that we've forgotten that we can use the classical vocabulary to actually come up with new stuff. And I
I
think
agree.
he really broke a barrier right there because he showed that using the classical style in a different way, you can still make relevant and timeless pieces. So
Right.
yeah,
As a language, as a beautiful language, like you don't just have to do so and so's famous plays in French or in English or in Spanish. Like you can take the language and do some, like
yeah,
it's a language. It's like oil painting, like you don't learn to be a painter and just paint the Mona Lisa over and over like a lunatic. Yeah, and those things can exist side by side. And you're right about Petipa. A lot of those ballets are totally lost. And a lot of them weren't like in its time, it was really innovative. It was like, wow, what's this big show with all these dancers and these new steps? It was almost seen like that it was tacky.
yeah,
Like how probably some of us look at the circus now, like Cirque du Soleil. Like some people really love it and other people are like kind of turning their noses up, like, oh, but you know, that's not high art. I
yeah.
think there's a lot of parallels there.
I don't know. I went to see the Cirque du Soleil, I think 6 months ago, and I think what really struck me was the freedom of it. That it was like there was a giant snail at some point, and people were doing that, and I was like, you were in a dream-like thing, but it was so cool because they were just doing stuff, and it felt like they were inspired. That
Right.
they weren't just doing this to sell tickets. And I feel like
Right.
sometimes, especially when it comes to, oh, we got to do a Swan Lake because we need to sell it, we're missing some of the spirit behind it, the artistry of people being implicated in it.
Right. Yeah, well, and that's the hard thing about having something that is precious but not necessarily immediately commercial. And if it's not funded
Yeah,
federally, then then that is the cycle. Like it cycles, it's like its own death is built in simply because of what it has to do to survive. And I think so. In the last couple of years, I got involved a little bit with some circus companies and productions. It just kind of happened coming out of COVID because when we were finally allowed to work again, everybody needed to be socially distanced.
Yeah.
So now instead of needing like, 1,000 square feet, now all of a sudden we needed 3,000 square feet. And I was like, oh my God, where are we going to make this happen? And so then it was like, oh, the circus school, because they have 30-foot ceilings and like these huge spaces. Anyway, so I got into it a little bit and I was like, wow, it's so cool because circus, I mean, I love ballet more than life itself. Like, I am here with you as a fangirl, right? But circus really can be anything. Like, you could go to a circus show on a Tuesday and see, X, Y, and Z things. And then you go to a circus show on a Thursday and it's a totally different, like, none of the material is different. None of the skill set, I mean, are the same. I meant none of the material, none of the skill sets are the same. Whereas, like, if you go to Le Corsaire on Tuesday and Swan Lake on Thursday, you're like, oh, I get it. I see the pattern,
Yeah.
But circus is just like this open world. And I was like, we could do a lot more with dance. I think there's a lot of potential commercially, artistically, but you don't have to leave any of that beauty behind, because the language, like you just could bring it with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely some new interesting issue that we've been seeing, and we'll see how it goes. I think a lot of choreographers are now trying to do new classics or just show how the ballet vocabulary can be used in different ways. I think we're getting somewhere. Yeah.
Well, and it'll have to get somewhere. I really feel like it's a new time in so many industries,
Yeah.
you know?
And like we're forced to evolve, and ballet is gonna evolve. Like I don't think a lot of people feel like, oh, ballet is gonna go extinct in like 2 decades. And so I think just like people won't stop listening to music, obviously you won't listen to Haydn, you may listen to Bad Bunny, but you will still listen to music.
Right.
Same thing.
You know, people have been saying that ballet was going to go extinct for like 300 years. It's hilarious. Like when you read these old, letters and diaries of old ballet masters and choreographers, and it's like they're all complaining about the same thing. They're like, oh, the dancers used to be artistic and now they're just technical and all the art is lost. And 50 years later, it's the same thing and the same thing. Like, that account on Instagram, Ballet Moods?
Oh yeah.
But there was one where it was something like, okay, cue the older dancers to come in and say, oh, this younger generation doesn't have any artistry left.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just how it goes.
Yeah. It's the one thing that older generations all have in common. It's
Right.
like the younger ones.
Yeah. They're like, oh, they're just athletic. They don't know anything about the nuances anymore. But, they were saying that in the 1700s, like before we even had point shoes.
Yeah. I mean, it's really comforting to know that people were still having the same problems
Yeah.
even before the point shoe was invented. So we still have a long way to evolve and improve.
We're going to be fine.
Yeah.
We're going to be just fine. Speaking of evolution, so the last we spoke, you were telling me about your interest in psychology and dance. And I think that's such an interesting connection. And I think it's really important, like dancers' mental health. And, so I'd just like to hear about, like, are you still studying psychology? What do you think would help the dancers? What do you think? What problems do you feel that they run into?
I feel that not only dancers, but that just studying psychology is very gives you a really important insight on how you yourself work and how you confront the world. So I think everybody should learn a little bit of psychology because it really helps you studying. So I'm not speaking as a licensed psychologist, but yeah, I feel like as dancers, we're in a really competitive field. There's a lot of stress, and there's studies that prove that we're more at risk of developing different kind of disorders than the general public. The help of a therapist or somebody that can guide you can really benefit your well-being. But at the same time, it's not just about disorders. You can really, even if you're fine, you can really use psychology to improve the way you perform and your well-being. And I feel that I've been trying to introduce different coping mechanisms, set myself goals, and just understanding how you work under pressure, what you need, because we are all different. So, really understanding how you work, I feel makes a really big difference in not just achieving your optimal performance, but also in you being emotionally well while doing that, not sacrificing your health just for the performance. But probably you'll realize that when you're healthy, you actually perform way better. I think there's still a lot of old discourse about, especially like eating, about competitiveness that's not healthy and that's been pushed around. And we need to really stop it. And I think nowadays all of us are way more conscious of
Mhm.
all the issues. And there's really being, as you said, like culture is changing and in a lot of different ways. And I think right now psychology is more important than ever. So yeah, I'm really interested in it. I'll try to finish at some point, and I think it gives you a lot of tools to improve your well-being and your performance as well.
So interesting. So, how did you find that?
I was having a lot of problems with stress and just being very anxious all the time, and I thought, well, maybe studying psychology is going to be cheaper than going to the therapist. Okay, don't do that. Go to your therapist. One thing doesn't is not an alternative for the
I
other.
feel like that's such a dancer thing to do. They're like, well, I'm just going to learn it all myself.
Yeah,
I'm going to do it myself. I've got it. I've got
I'll
it.
take it out here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but so yeah, because I was having like I it was really impairing my ability to dance
Mhm,
properly. So I was like, well, this is something that I need to know about if I want to get better.
mhm,
So I just started studying, and I knew I wanted to do something apart from dance. So I started studying, and I feel like it really the way it mixes with ballet is something that there's a lot of sports psychologists
mhm.
and a lot of professional athletes have psychologists and therapists in their teams. While I don't think there's any ballet company in the world that has a therapist on payroll.
Mhm.
And I really think it's something that dancers can benefit from.
I agree with you. I'd love to see that. A therapist on the payroll for everybody to be doing gyrotonics. I know some companies do it, like San Francisco Ballet is doing it. I don't know if Philadelphia Ballet is. These things that would make it so that they can last longer
Yeah,
in the best possible way, not just like hold them up by their bones.
I think we're definitely the culture is shifting, and we've put the stress on health and safety, and that to realize that we really need to make the most out of our bodies, and we're gonna achieve that by doing it in the most respectful way towards it.
Mhm.
And I think everybody's realized that. So
Yeah.
companies are really pushing for health screenings, for cross training, more hours of PT, a lot of different things to support the dance in all of its different versions. Mental health,
Mhm.
nutrition, diets. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting. It's like what I'm a little older than you, I think, but it's like I really see the change in the culture. Like even in the last couple of years, even teaching, now they have all of these meetings about, consent, like to correct somebody, like, and I'm like, wow, it's so funny. Just like, of course we should ask permission. I mean, I feel like I always ask my kids permission. Not every single time like we establish trust, but
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, honey, I'm gonna correct you. Is that okay? Like, I think it's so funny that it took us so long to get to some of these
yeah.
places,
And I
you
think
know?
also we romanticize a lot of the suffering because it makes it so the achievements feel like more. Oh,
Yeah.
we suffered, so.
Yeah.
But since the suffering has a meaning, it's a means to something. And then I feel like that's why a lot of people who have been trained in ways that are not what should be, and now are reticent to change because they feel that if we can actually be better while not suffering, their suffering is not justified. So they spend all those years in pain and doing things that they didn't want to, uh, without having to, you know? And I don't know, when you go on YouTube and search for like old documentaries or not so old documentaries, Russian schools,
Yeah.
and you see all these malnourished people getting yelled at and like being called cows. And I think we're definitely somewhere different, but there's still a lot of work to do regarding that.
Well, and it always takes discernment, like you have to be paying attention because, if we swing too far, it's like you can't have the pendulum on one side of the room or the other. Like you need to make a good decision and know why you're doing what you're doing. You know,
Yeah, yeah, teaching is a very complicated thing, actually. And I feel that especially when things change and the way we teach changes, obviously the security that it gave people to know that things were this way,
hmm
then that's what happens, that we tend to go farther than what we were
hmm
supposed to. But it just, I guess, with time, we're all gonna find a new standard of teaching, of dancing, of training that's gonna be more in line with what the ideal should be.
Yeah, and with communicating with our potential audiences, what the art form even is. So that there can be more. I love the way you said it, that there weren't enough resources to absorb the talent. That's what I want to see. I want to see more resources that can absorb all the talent, you know.
Same. I mean, it's hard, obviously. We, with the current state of the world, culture is obviously not the number one priority. But
But you know what? It's going to come up. We're going to need it more than ever because things are going to become even a bigger mess. And this thing that we're here talking about, and artists like you and people who are in the world doing it, it's going to matter even more because people are going to need it. They're going to need healing. They're going to need beauty. They're going to need hope. So yeah, when the boat's being rocked, it's like, what's happening? Nobody's paying attention to the arts. But once we realize that everything is burnt down, it's like the arts matter even more. Like during the Great Depression, who did really well were jazz musicians because people had no money and they would save their pennies to like go and have some joy, like to have a beer and some good music on a Friday for whatever a nickel. It's like, well, we need something to live for. And that's what the arts give us. It gives us something to live for, collectively.
yeah,
Personally, you could have your family or your cat or whatever, but like collectively, we need the arts.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I just hope we don't take much long to realize that.
Oh no, you'll still be dancing when we realize that.
Hope
Yeah, I hope so too. Speaking of you dancing, oh, I know what I wanted to ask you before we get to that. What about your program in Spain? You were telling me that you were thinking about doing some kind of a program in Spain.
Oh yeah. Well, I already told you that there's a lot of dancers that have to leave and
hmm
a lot of teachers there. So with I'm part of an association of
Hmm.
Catalan dancers. Catalonia is my region, is
Hmm.
where our area of action is. So we're just trying to work with the different actors there, with the schools, with the companies that are now appearing, to organize shows, to organize training programs, to organize just talks or meetings about this kind of stuff,
Hmm.
especially for the people that are outside, professional dancers that have left, to come back and be able to
Hmm.
all that they've learned internationally back to the community and really show them that you can really work as a ballet dancer, and that
Hmm.
it may seem really scary to leave your family, leave your friends, go to a completely different place where they speak a different language, culture is different, but that it's doable. People have done it before, people will keep doing it, and just a matter of strengthening the connective tissue of the culture there and
Hmm.
trying to make a change.
I
So
love that.
yeah, it's complicated, but I think we're doing good work, and slowly but surely, we're helping, especially the new generation of
Mhm.
dancers, to realize that. Because I remember when I first started, like my parents didn't know you could actually be a ballet dancer. I didn't know what it meant to be a ballet dancer. I just like that. I just knew that I liked to dance,
Mhm.
but it's just not knowing is the standard there. You're just like, oh, I didn't know this was actually a thing.
Right.
S- To have someone that you can actually relate more to, because somebody that's from your own town or that studied in the same school as you that speaks your own language is
Hmm.
different than just bringing, this professional ballet dancer from the Royal Ballet that trained in the Royal Ballet School and is from London. So I think it's really helpful and really hopeful for the young students there to see that it's doable and that yeah, you can do it.
I so love that. I really love that you're doing that. If there's ever anything I can do to help you with that, let me know. I think it's really important.
Thank you.
No, I mean it, either in Spain or like promoting it, whatever. If there's anything I can do, just let me know.
We're actually like we're doing things. I don't know. When I was teaching this summer, I saw that like they were much better than I was at their age. So I was like, oh, we like things have changed, or that they knew they're much more exposed to dance through the different shows that we schedule, and
Mhm.
you start recognizing them, and they're
Mhm.
much more connected to the world than we were. I don't know.
Mhm.
I realized like until I was 14 years old, I didn't know you could do triple fouettes.
Okay.
And because I'd never seen a ballet show, and then when I saw that, I was mind blown. Like the possibilities were much bigger than I thought, and it's just something that I don't know. I felt right now with YouTube and with different things that we're doing,
Mhm.
how people are able to realize earlier.
Mhm.
To think that I had been training already for 7 years and I didn't know that was possible. And I remember I was just like watching, I think it was Gillian Murphy,
Right.
a video of Corsair.
Corsair, the Odalisque,
Yeah.
right? With the yeah.
And I was like, whoa, you can
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah. No, that video changed my world too. I totally relate to that. Yeah.
So yeah, it's just that people don't know and they won't be able to know if we don't uh, bring it to them.
Isn't that funny about the human mind? It's like it's the same thing with the Olympics. It's like there'll be a world record and then somebody breaks it and then all of a sudden that's the new standard.
Yeah.
It's like we just needed the permission,
Yeah, it's crazy.
right? It's like our we don't even have limits. It's just illusory. Like it seems so real and then it's just illusory.
Yeah. And like
Well,
generations keep getting better and better.
oh my God, this generation coming up right now, man, they are amazing. I am so into them. I love them.
You know, as a little bit older dancer, it's kind of scary because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna lose my job. you know, Younger generations take it easier. don't get too good.
Don't grow up too fast.
Yeah, but yeah,
I do love the dancers coming up right now because I think now it's been a couple of decades of people becoming, technically amazing. So they're starting to like really integrate everything together. Like they are more expressive. Whereas I feel like, right after Sylvie Guillaume, this world of technique opened and it became all about that for a little while. And now I think it's integrating. But that being said, I don't think there's any replacement for time on a dancer. Like the textured, rich nature of the dancer who's been in it for a long time, you just cannot replace it. Like as long as somebody's still healthy and they can do what they do, you couldn't replace, like we could never replace a Marianela Nunez with like somebody fresh off the boat from YAGP. Like you can't. It doesn't mean that they won't get there, but it's like, so I don't think you have anything to worry about is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Like at the end of the day, you can find a lot of prodigies, like 7-year-old prodigies that do all kinds of stuff, but what they will never be able to do at 7 years old is have all the knowledge, all the mastery of the art that a dancer who has experienced much more, not just as a dancer, but also as a person has. And
Yeah. And as a person in dance, it's like, because you really come into the studio and you face yourself and you go through all of these phases with yourself and with the work. Like no teacher can do it for you. It's just time and devotion.
yeah, I feel like, I don't know, especially when I was telling you about how stressed I was when I was 17, 18, I was about to go into the company, and I felt like uh, I was still missing a lot. And I
Mhm.
realized that obviously I was missing a lot. I'm still missing a lot, but mm, just like go along with it. Your body's gonna work with you as you mature, as you get older. You're gonna start to understand. Like every time I go to the bar and do a tendu or a plie, I'm like, oh, I understand now. Like things are easier. I just realized, oh, I've been doing this wrong. And also just the way like somebody training you, the different coaches, all the different people that you get into contact with, the different, even the dancers that you see, it makes such a difference because in the end, like all that knowledge of just watching other people dance or having passed through the hands of different coaches really makes you unique and
Yeah.
gives you the artistry that that no technical prodigy can compare to, because it's something that's not innate. It's something that you have to learn.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can't skip steps. No pun intended. Speaking of steps, how can people how can we support more of your work? How can people follow you? What would you like to share with everyone who's gonna be listening to this?
I mean, you're very welcome to follow me on my social networks. I have Instagram, TikTok, as you said, and also YouTube, where I'm trying to upload some videos of myself dancing more regularly. Yeah, you're really welcome to follow me there if you want
And
to.
it's all under your name. I'll post the links
Yeah,
below, but just in
yeah,
case somebody.
I'll go.
Okay.
And I mean, if you're able to come to Philadelphia Ballet, come with the show. We'll be really happy to have you in the audience. And if you're not able to, just go to your local ballet company, support the arts however you're able to. And yeah, keep on dancing.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you want more dance content, you can follow me on TikTok and YouTube at Cynthia Dragoni Dance, or sign up for the email list at cynthiadragoni.dance. I'll leave you with this quote from the revolutionary choreographer Martha Graham. One does not choose to be a dancer, one is chosen. And with that, you live all your life. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Dance Lens podcast. Bye bye.